A talented, virtuous painter is working on a portrait of a duchess in her luxurious palace. He's in control of her every movement, ordering her how to pose and how to look. It's unusual enough for the Duchess to have someone giving her orders, but then he goes over to fix her with his own hands, moving her skirt, caressing her neckline, their noses almost touching. Noticing she is flushed, he asks if something's wrong, perfectly aware of the effect he's having on her. She smiles nervously. Her husband, the Grand Duke, would have him beheaded if he'd seen him. After he compliments her beauty and whispers, she firmly grabs him to kiss him. He reciprocates and kisses her neck passionately, but finally stops, as he doesn't want his head cut off. The atmosphere becomes tense and uncomfortable as he resumes the portrait. She's tired and frustrated, complaining it's taking too long. With a soft glance, he replies true portraits take time, just like seduction. Mr. Kazat comes back home, to a humble room he barely can afford. He prepares for a ball the Duchess has invited him to, perfecting his manners and speech. At the palace, the attendants are in awe at the beauty of the painting, displayed for everyone to see. A young woman observes the painting, catching Kazat's eye. She talks about the picture with a sensitiveness that touches the painter deeply. He introduces himself to the woman, but as he tries to get closer to her, her father takes her away from him, indignant at Kazat's boldness and manners. Kazat quickly grabs his sketchbook, beginning to capture her features from a careful distance. The Duchess catches him staring at the young lady and prompts him to confide in her, as she's not a jealous woman and loves some gossip. As he points at the girl, the Duchess informs him it's Ehrengard. She comes from a very stern military family, and it won't be easy for him to earn her love, as she's very serious and proud. But perhaps he shouldn't be entirely discouraged, as seduction takes time. The Duchess actually has a favor to ask of him regarding seduction. Her husband, the Grand Duke, is gravely ill, and as their son Lothar is not married, he doesn't have a claim to the throne. The Duchess is concerned that the Grand Duke will pass away before Lothar finds a wife, and therefore the throne will go to the Grand Duke's greedy cousins, the Marbots. It is likely because her son doesn't even look at women, as he's too reserved and innocent. He is actually nearby, sitting on a couch, surrounded by girls fighting for his attention. But he focuses on his reading, not paying them any mind. The Duchess tasks Mr. Kazat with teaching her son the ways of seduction, to ignite the spark of passion in him. When she asks how much he asks in return for the favor, he looks at Ehrengard. He'll do it if he gets to paint a portrait of her. Mr. Kazat packs his things to go stay at the Duchess's palace, delighted to be leaving his poor room and the opportunity to ascend in status. In the palace's gardens, he approaches the shy prince to start with his mission. The heir to the throne is in a bad mood, as his parents want him to get married, and he doesn't want to lose his freedom. But Kazat opens his sketchbook, filled with feminine nudes, and shows the astounded boy what a love life promises. Gaining the prince's trust, he spends several days with him talking about women, love, and the pleasures of intimacy. As he's going on a trip to Liechtenstein to paint a family's youngest daughter, Ludmilla, he asks the Duchess to take the prince with him, to introduce them. Prince Lothar finally wants to be with a woman, and she would be the perfect candidate. She's young, beautiful, and from a prestigious family. When the Duchess agrees, Kazat disguises the prince as his apprentice, so he can interact with her without the pressure of his noble title. As Katsot paints Ludmilla, he talks up his apprentice, telling her how talented and sensitive he is, and how he's described her in the most flattering ways. It's as if he knew exactly what she wanted to hear, and the sweet, sensitive girl is quickly interested in the handsome young man. After successfully doing the seduction for Lothar, Kazat decides it's time to leave them alone, prompting the prince to reveal his identity. The two young nobles look into each other's eyes, and with a genuine smile, they start their love story, running off to be alone in the gardens. Back at the Duchess's palace, she and Kazat celebrate his success. But the Duchess, in return, has failed him, as Ehrengard's family won't allow her to pose for a portrait, nor she is interested in doing it. He declines the monetary payment she insists on giving him, but accepts the invitation to the young couple's wedding, where he gets to see Ehrengard again, but doesn't try any moves on her, knowing the formal, crowded setting will be as unfavorable as the ball for him to approach her. While painting a beautiful sunset in the country, the noble guards come to look for him, demanding that he immediately goes with them, as the Duchess has requested to see him. Kazat has become her main confidant, playing the role of her unofficial advisor, and knows with every favor to the nobles comes a possibility for him. He arrives at the palace, where the Duchess is terribly distressed. Ludmilla is pregnant, and the due date will reveal the child was conceived out of wedlock. Kazat is amused by the couple's impatience to be together, but the usually easygoing, good-humored woman is desperate. A scandal that big could mean a capital sentence for both her son and the princess. Kazat resolves to send them away, hide them from everyone until after a few months the baby's been born, and lie about the timeline. He'll escort them, but they'll also need a company lady for the princess. He describes the perfect candidate, knowingly numbering every quality Ehrengard has, from her status to her character. The Duchess understands perfectly what he's doing, and she agrees to his request, but she is sure Ehrengard won't surrender to his affection. As he is confident in his seduction skills, she offers to place a bet on his relentless desire. If he conquers Ehrengard's love, she'll give him everything he could ever dream of, a job at the noble court, and a luxurious abode to live as he pleases. But if he doesn't win his beloved over, he'll be obliged to sleep with the Duchess. He hesitates, taking his time to digest the proposal, but ultimately accepts the wager. Convincing Ehrengard's father, and Ehrengard herself, to go away to be the princess's company is not easy. Khazad swiftly describes the qualities even her father can't deny. She comes from a long line of warriors, raised in the strictest military codes, smart, capable, and of an unwavering strength. His father is unfazed by his dashing speech, but receives the request from the Duchess as an obligation, as he has sworn loyalty to the Grand Duke, and knows his daughter was raised to be perfectly capable to serve and honor her family. He orders his daughter to pack her things, and she obeys, with only one request: to say goodbye to Kurt. Both Khazad and the Duchess are taken aback by the mention of a man in Ehrengard's life, but they can't back down now. On the way to the castle, they watch as she runs through a meadow to embrace her fiancé and bid him farewell, making Khazad very annoyed and the Duchess very satisfied, as she's sure of her success in their bet. Sad about leaving her fiancé, but proud of serving her country, Ehrengard accommodates herself in her room at the remote Rosenbad castle. When saying goodnight, Khazad looks her in the eye in his most seductive way and confidently kisses her hand. Ehrengard acts polite, but is actually terribly irritated by his manners, calling him pretentious and silly when he finally leaves her alone. As everyone is getting settled at the huge Rosenbad residence, Khazad takes the lead and orders the staff around, making everyone curious about his role with the noble family. When he explains he's merely a painter, Ehrengard remembers he was at the party and asks him about the painting. But instead of joining her in genuine conversation, he tries to act aloof as a tactic to attract her, but she showcases her disinterest once more. She can see right through him and won't entertain his advances. The prince and princess arrive at the palace, Ludmilla heavily pregnant. Even though Khazad recruited her for his own interest, Ehrengard is a perfect fit to keep the princess company. She and Ehrengard quickly bond, and Ehrengard opens up to Ludmilla about her fiancé. She is truly in love with him, and they are very close, having even taught each other combat skills. But Khazad is obsessed with her and seems more interested than ever, as if the slowness of his progress validated his theories on seduction and made his labor more valuable. One morning, at dawn, he sees Ehrengard going to the stables. He quickly dresses up and joins her next to the horses, pretending to be there for his own interest, even though he has no experience as an equestrian. Ehrengard invites him to join her on her ride, and she and Khazad gallop away, him struggling to keep up with her. She guides him to her favorite spot to see the sunrise, and he describes the phenomenon she so admires, of the early light hitting the mountains. For the first time, he talks to her about something genuine, and doesn't have to make things up or pretend to catch her interest. Maybe there can be something more between them than his calculated moves. Back at the stables, they are notified that the Grand Duke's cousins, the Marbods, are at the gates to visit the prince and princess, endangering the Roos. Khazad rushes to the gates to make them go away, but they insist on seeing the couple, even pushing him to the ground. Thankfully, Prince Lothar arrives, and being the person they actually want to see, he manages to shut the door in their faces, excusing the princess as she's very sick and quarantined. Their hasty behavior is very suspicious to the Marbods, who resolve to remain close to the castle to figure out what's really going on, as it could be of benefit to them. At a tavern, they begin their investigation by bribing a waiter, who will keep an eye out for them. Khazad maintains correspondence with the Duchess to inform her of the castle's news and his advances on their bet. Something amazing has happened. He has achieved the great feat of making a painting of his muse. He has painted Ehrengard bathing in the lake, although unbeknown to her. He continues with his seduction, taking his time. He doesn't touch her nor compliment her, which is usual technique. He gains her favors through gestures, just as bringing her horse from back home to the castle, and simply spending time with her. Ehrengard starts warming up to him, but she's not falling for him. She meets in secret with her fiancé, letting the audience know that he knows where she is, and he will be close by to visit her. Meanwhile, Ludmilla starts giving birth. The Duchess is quickly notified and she rushes over, anxious, but full of joy to meet the baby. The Duchess and Khazad chat relaxedly in the garden. She asks about Ehrengard, and Khazad excitedly claims that the arrival of the child serves his purpose perfectly, as it fills the air with warm, sweet feelings, and he is hopeful of his success. The Duchess has to leave immediately not to raise suspicions, but Khazad informs her about one last thing. They've found a wet nurse, a farmer woman called Lisbeth. He picks her up at her house, where her husband is screaming at her, furious at her leaving. But Lisbeth seems relieved to be apart from him, and grateful for the job. The peace at the castle contrasts with the chaos the Marbods plan on bringing. At the tavern, they chat with the waiter they bribed, who brings them information. The noble family has hired someone new, a young woman with small children. The Rosenbads don't quite understand what he's trying to tell them, but the waiter points to a despairing man sitting at the bar, drinking. It's Lisbeth's husband. The Marbuds approach him and ask if he has information on the Rosenbad castle and its occupants. He complains that his wife was taken there, against his will, and he is not allowed to see her or come close to the castle. After some insistence from the couple, he confesses there is a child at the household, and his wife has been hired to feed him. The Marbuds are ecstatic, and decide to write to their cousin, the Grand Duke. They also offer a deal to Lisbeth's husband, if he can get a hold of the baby and bring him to them. Not only he'll get his wife back, but also an important position at the court when they take over the throne. Back at Rosenbad, Kazat continues painting his muse without her consent, while she bathes at the lake. He remains undiscovered for the moment, but when he arrives at the castle after a painting session, Ehrengard greets him, intrigued about him coming back from outside so early. He lies about painting nature at night, and she insists on seeing his work, but he makes up excuses. When she reaches for the paintings, he takes her hand, and the world seems to stop for a moment. But they're interrupted, as the Duchess has come back to the castle with news of a crisis. The Marbuds are visiting, and they're obligated to receive them. They'll hide the kid with Lisbeth, the nurse, and disguise Ludmilla as a still pregnant woman. The Duchess always has time for matters of intimacy, and asks about Ehrengard next. She doesn't get why Kazat isn't seducing her the old-fashioned way, just like he did with the Duchess when painting her portrait. But Kazat is an artist, and he intends to create a masterpiece. He will conquer her soul first, not her body. He will show Ehrengard her painting, and then she'll surrender to him. Ehrengard, having eavesdropped on the conversation, is horrified that she's been used as a piece in a game of his, and having terrible suspicions about how he could have been painting her without her knowing, runs away in shock to Kazat's accommodations. She approaches a covered canvas in the middle of the room, and approaches it almost in fear. She takes off the sheet and discovers herself in the nude, from Kazat's point of view. Shocked and repulsed at his entitlement and violation, she starts searching through his things, finding more and more sketches of her. Overwhelmed with anger and not knowing how to deal with the situation, she walks off to the woods to let off some steam, and runs into Lisbeth's husband Matthias, screaming his wife's name. When she asks him if he's okay, he reveals to her he's been hired to steal the child, and he's desperate to see her again, but doesn't know if stealing a baby is the right thing to do. Ehrengard thinks for a moment, her eyes lightening with the spark of an idea, and then firmly encourages him to go through with his plans. Next morning, at the lake, Kazat waits for Ehrengard, who of course never arrives. He meets her at the castle while everyone is getting ready to receive the Marbuds, Ludmilla being helped to put on her fake pregnant belly. Ehrengard approaches Kazat and apologizes for being absent at the lake that morning, baffling him, and making it seem she knew he was watching her all along and was just playing along. She wants him to finish the painting, but in his room, both being closer and face to face. She seductively prompts him to shut his eyes, to picture them together, and quickly puts his sketchbook in his pocket, carrying out a plan we still don't know about. At the table, they sit together and look at each other in complicity, watching the meal go by. Everyone pretends for a while that everything is normal, both the family and the Marbuds. Meanwhile, Matthias sneaks into the household and finds the nursery, where Lisbeth is asleep. Matthias grabs the baby from his crib, just in time for his wife to wake up, screaming at him to stop, and chasing him while he runs out of the house. Finally, the Marbuds bring up the elephant in the room and confront the Duchess, prompting her to stop the farce. Mrs. Marbud gets up and starts feeling Ludmilla's belly, stating it feels too soft and therefore not real. But Ehrengard distracts her by spilling her drink on Mr. Marbud before she can go any further. Lisbeth's screams interrupt the scene, as both she and Matthias run up to them. Matthias stops in his tracks, unsure what to do next, and sprints to a carriage, followed by his wife. A chase ensues as Ehrengard, Kazat, the Marbuds, and the Duchess go after him. Ehrengard runs into his fiancé, but ignores him to continue the chase, leaving him puzzled. When she catches up to Matthias, he's at his home, the baby safe in Lisbeth's arms. She starts hitting him, which seems strange, because she encouraged him to steal the baby. Everyone arrives and the Marbuds start bragging about their success, pointing at the secret child as evidence of their legitimate claim to the throne. But they are interrupted by Ehrengard, who energetically declares the child is no evidence, but her own son. The group is stunned, and even though the Duchess goes along with her lie, the Marbuds are not convinced. If it's her son, then who's the father? Why isn't she with her fiancé? Ehrengard replies the father is actually Kazat. They've been having an affair. As they demand proof, she shows them the notebook she put in his pocket containing all her nude drawings. Ehrengard's generosity and courage backfires against her, as her fiancé, who had followed her, arrives while the notebook is being displayed, and he sees the intimate sketches. Kazat, who's usually good in tricky situations, faints, and as Ehrengard helps him up, Kurt strikes a glove across his face, challenging him to a duel at dawn. Next morning, they meet in the woods. Kazat has no chance against the expert military man, who won't back down on his challenge, nor listen to Kazat. The duel commences, but before Kurt can shoot Kazat, Ehrengard saves the day once more. She arrives on her horse, embracing her lover before he can shoot, and explains the misunderstanding, saving Kazat's life, even though she hates him. Kazat was right when he said she was of an unwavering strength and intelligence, although he had only said it to get his way, while we've seen it over and over again. Again at the church, the prince and princess baptize the child, safe and happy. Ehrengard is recognized for her service to the noble family, and Kazat is wounded from having shot himself in the foot by accident. He fulfills his debt to the Duchess by sleeping with her, and finally moves to Rome. He may not have gotten his way with Ehrengard, and therefore not earned a life of luxury as a member of the Duchess's court, but he has gotten for himself the life he's always dreamed of. He thrives as a painter, even getting to portray the Pope, and also as a master of seduction, with rows of women falling for his charms.